Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. It is I, Jan Michael, coming at you with a new Oscar predictions video, this time for July of 2024. Alright, not gonna do that voice the entire time. Hey everybody, it's time for my new Oscar predictions. This time, taking a look at the supporting performances, which are actually a little bit tough to talk about. So, I gotta just let you know, there are gonna be some big names omitted from the list this month. And the reason for it being, while it makes sense to include certain people because the movies they're gonna be in are gonna be very big, because we don't know what their role really entails. Are they gonna be big? Are they gonna be small? Are they even gonna be supporting performances? I decided to include people that I know a little bit more about their roles of. So, please keep that in mind. Don't be pissed off, or do, when you don't see the big names that you're probably predicting not here on my list. They may be back next month. It's just for this 1 month, I do want to talk about other performances that could potentially surprise us. Like always, these are going to be in alphabetical order, and as it's hot as balls right now and I got to turn off all my air to do this, we're going to move quickly. So let's get started. Amy Adams for Clara and the Sun. So we don't know if this film is actually going to be coming out this year. This is the newest film by Taika Waititi. And just like how I started my list last month talking about Amy in lead performance, I thought what an appropriate way to start off this video by going over her in supporting performance, which I think she is going to be supporting. I'm already breaking my own rules here. But look, reading the synopsis, from what I can tell, first, the movie is about a robot that people kind of rent out, I believe, in order to solve their problems. And I believe Amy plays one of the characters that rents this robot or buys it, whatever the case may be. So that seems to me to be a supporting performance, but I mean, we'll find out. But I mean, just like with Night Bitch, this is also one of those roles that, I don't know, does it scream Oscar? A lot of people seem to have a lot of faith in Night Bitch. I personally am still on the fence. I don't know if the Oscars are really gonna go for it, but just the same, might as well include this one as well, just because I'm on that same fence in regards to if the Oscars are even going to pay this movie any attention. Maria Bakalova for The Apprentice. Oh, okay, the big elephant in the room is The Apprentice actually going to be releasing this year? And a lot of people are shifting their opinion to no, it's not. Last I heard, it was close to a distributor, but I mean, that was like 2-3 weeks ago, and I have not heard any updates since then. I've also heard some people saying that one of the producers, who is a very pro-Trump, has that power to not let the movie be released. So with that, I know a lot of people are really just backing out on the performances, the film in general, getting any sort of nominations. So yeah, you gotta take that into consideration. If that does end up happening, I mean, all these is just out the window. But I still wanted to mention it, especially with as many people were talking about in this video, that if the movie does come out, you do at least have to give some consideration to if the supporting performances are going to get nominated. And Maria is definitely on that list of potential nominees. Austin Butler for Dune Part 2. Yeah, a lot of people were going crazy for this performance back when the film released, which, I mean, makes some sense. I do think his performance was one of the better ones in the film in terms of maybe being Oscar worthy, but if I'm being honest, I just don't think he has enough moments in the film to push him to that awards recognition. I mean, unless all other performances this year just suck, or they underwhelm, or they're just not as impactful as you wanted them to be, but I don't know. I at least gotta include him here just because a lot of people were discussing him, but truthfully, I would not keep him in my top 5. Probably would not even keep him in my top 10, but hey, we're just having discussions here, so let me know what you guys think. Joanne Chen for Dee Dee. So here's one that I thought could have the potential to show up at the Oscars. I mean, mother characters, especially when they have heart-to-hearts with their kids, they can bring tears to people's eyes. So why isn't this a more stronger contender? Well, I guess just based off the people who have already seen the film, she just doesn't have as much to do here, so I guess that is going to count against her, but that isn't stopping people from at least putting them somewhere on their list. So again, if just all other performances just aren't that impactful or amazing, maybe she sneaks in just because of the weakness of the category, which I know is kind of sad to say, but it's just gearing up to be one of those type of years, which is fine. I mean, especially with how amazing last year was. Regardless, I'm definitely bringing her in right now just because I've not seen the movie yet, so I don't have the reality to snap me out of this delusion just yet. Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. Here's one of the big ones I definitely wanted to talk about. A lot of people are very hopeful that Kieran shows up at the Oscars. He has a real good momentum going right now, especially off of his win with Succession. And I think people are ready for him to break into the Oscars. People have had a fondness for him for some time now. I personally really like him just because of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I'm sure a lot of people are the same way. But if you have seen Succession, I hear he's fantastic in that show as well. Though I have heard some people saying, well, the movie itself isn't a huge Oscar contender. Like, it doesn't really have the potential to get nominations other than for him. So maybe just based on that, it just doesn't get in at all. Though, I mean, come on, we've seen those performances get in just by themselves. After Sun comes to mind. So with the type of year, again, it's going to be, he could potentially get in. So I'm holding on to hope here. That being said, what do you guys think? Are you excited? I would really like to see Kieran finally break into the Oscars. That would be one of the highlights of the night for sure. Jamie Lee Curtis for The Last Showgirl. Here's another one that we don't quite know if it's going to be releasing this year or not. And on top of that, we really don't know what Jamie's character is going to be in the film just yet. So my sole reason for including her here, other than giving you somebody new to think about, is that I think in past years when voters aren't sure who to put in that 5th slot, they tend to fall back on previous winners or nominees that they either have a fondness for or is just the first thing that pops into their mind. I think of last year with like Jodie Foster getting in. I just don't know I don't think they knew what they want to do with that 5th slot, so they're like, oh yeah, Jodie. At least that's my train of thought for that. So, especially coming off of Jamie's win for Everything Everywhere All at Once, maybe that's still fresh in people's minds. So if, again, I don't want to repeat myself, if it is a slower year, the voters aren't sure what to do with that 5th slot, and they see Jamie Lee Curtis, they're like, oh yeah, I'll just pencil that in. I can potentially see that happening, but we'll find out. If the movie gets pushed to next year, that, of course, what I said just no longer is valid. Daniel Deadwyler for The Piano Lesson. I am really unsure about The Piano Lesson being a huge Oscar contender. Like, a big part of me really wants this to succeed, be this amazing grand film that I think a lot of people are currently thinking it's going to be. The play I heard was very well received. It got a lot of Tony Awards, and I'm hoping that translates to an Oscar. But part of me also can envision seeing this film and going, oh man, this just feels like a play, but just like in movie form. Like the director didn't know how to transition it into a movie. And I really hope that isn't the case, especially because we need justice for Danielle, especially after her snub for Till. That was still such a fucking travesty. So I hope she gets her redemption here. But yeah, part of me is kind of scared that this is just not going to be as big of a contender as a lot of people are thinking it's going to be. But again, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for now. Anjanou Ellis Taylor for The Nickel Boys. I mean, this one really shouldn't come as a surprise. I think The Nickel Boys has the potential to be a huge Oscar contender. Like, this could, with the synopsis, if it's handled just right, I think this could be in serious contention to be a Best Picture winner. So the performances just gotta come along with it. Now, I don't quite know what her role is in the movie. I heard rumblings that at first she was gonna be playing this new character introduced in the movie that wasn't in the books as a reporter, but then I heard no, she's actually going to be playing one of the parents, I understand, of one of the kids. And if that's the case, again, I think with parent roles, especially if you have like a heart-to-heart with your child, it can bring tears to people's eyes. So that is a good indicator that maybe she will get nominated, especially if this does end up being big. But I don't know if that's actually the case. All I hear are rumors, and me digging hasn't brought anything new to light, so I guess this is just kind of like a big question mark for now. But I definitely gotta include her, especially because I do see the potential of this being such a big contender. Selena Gomez for Emilia Perez. This one's a little bit funny, actually, because I've heard two different stories here. I've seen people talk about the performance as it being good, just not great. It's like, yeah, she's fine, she does her job, whatever, it's not an Oscar contender. But then I have read reviews that state that she steals certain scenes in the movie, and she's a standout, and most definitely an Oscar contender. So that actually makes it kind of exciting, because, I mean, until I see the movie, I won't really know which way it could fall, but the potential is there for it to make a splash at the Oscars, especially with how well the film itself has been performing thus far. If this does end up being a huge Oscar contender, it just makes sense for the performances to come along with the film. And a lot of people are die-hard Selena Gomez fans, so I know they're really going to be vying for her to break into the Oscars. I mean, Murders in the Building is a huge popular show that they really like her in. My wife watches that show and she really likes her in it, so I can see it making a lot of people happy if she does get an Oscar nomination. Chris Hemsworth for Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This one's really just a pipe dream at this point in time, after the disappointment of the Furiosa box office result, so much so that it's probably killed the Mad Max series. I just don't see this being as big of an Oscar contender anymore, and definitely not in the performances. Which is a shame, because I do think Chris gives a really excellent performance, maybe one of his best. So I think this would be an awesome nomination. Maybe not going so far as to win, but I think it would be a really great lineup if he was in it. But yeah, I get it, it's a pipe dream. I just don't really think it's going to happen anymore. If the movie was a huge hit, I think people would be more serious about it, but yeah, just that's not the reality we're living in, which is a goddamn shame. Brian Tyree Henry for The Fire Inside. There's something about coaches in movies that make you really want to give them Oscar nominations, aren't they? I mean, look at film history. Sometimes the coaches are the standouts of the film, and you really connect with them a lot. So I do think, especially now having been an Oscar nominee in the past, this opens the door for Brian to get more nominations, and I think this one would be another good one to include it. That is, if the film ends up being good, of course. And honestly, I truly do think The Fire Inside does have the potential to be a big Oscar contender. I think it's been a while since we've seen like a big sports epic get into the Oscars and be a true potential for Best Picture, but I am getting ahead of myself here. We gotta see how the movie does first. But again, even if it doesn't do well, the door is open for Brian, so maybe he just gets in regardless if he gives a good enough performance. Samuel L. Jackson for The Piano Lesson. How shameful is it that Samuel has only had one Oscar nomination in his history? Like, he should have a whole bunch more by now. There are a couple of films that I've really loved him in that I truly do think should have been Oscar contenders. And here's the thing, kind of going back to what I said with The Piano Lesson, if the film doesn't end up being that spectacular of a thing, I could still see people pushing for him to get nominated and maybe even win. And part of me thinks that this is going to be one of those instances where if he does win and the movie's not spectacular, you're going to see it on those lists where it's like, oh, the Oscars that people won for the wrong films, and I can see that being a future for him. I mean, I would love for him to just have an Oscar, but I would like him to have an Oscar for the right role, right? So, I don't know. Again, this just adds more to my mixed feelings. So the best way to remedy this is Piano Lesson, just be spectacular. That's all you gotta do. Easy, right? Jennifer Lopez for Unstoppable. Another film we're not sure if it's actually gonna come out this year or not. Jennifer has actually been trying to break into the Oscars for some time now. She got incredibly close a few years ago for Hustlers. So, is this gonna be the role that finally breaks her in? I don't know. I gotta see something from the movie first. But again, her playing the mother of the protagonist, now to say 3 times in a row here, but especially when you are a mother character or a parent character and you're having that heart-to-heart with your child, it can bring tears to people's eyes. So yes, she could potentially get in, but again, this is just more of somebody to keep on your radar until we see more about the film. I can easily see this kind of falling off to the wayside for now. Natasha Lyonne for His 3 Daughters. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to be broken down into who's lead, who's supporting. My understanding as of right now is that the most adult daughter is the lead and everybody else is supporting. So if that's the case, I'm going to include the two supporting into the predictions here. So I'll talk about the other one in a few minutes here. But yeah, I mean, especially given the synopsis for the film, you can definitely bet this is going to be something that's going to try to attempt to make a lot of people cry, maybe multiple times. So this could be just a very strong ensemble cast of very strong performances. And as such, I gotta include these performances. That's all I really gotta say. Clarence Macklin for Sing Sing. Here's another interesting pick, because Clarence is basically just playing himself in the movie. It's him, it's his story in that role. And as such, do you get an Oscar nomination for just playing yourself? Is he acting? Is it just him being himself? Is it an over-the-top version of himself? Is this a one-and-done Oscar nomination? So I think there's so many conversations to be had, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the movie. It's very close to releasing at the time of this recording, so I'll definitely have a more stronger opinion afterwards, and the performances. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing what he does with himself. Elizabeth Olsen for His Three Daughters. And here's the youngest of the sisters for His Three Daughters. I mean, just go back to what I said about the previous one, and you pretty much got the same idea. Elizabeth, though, has been around for a while. I mean, she's big in the Marvel universe. Again, branching out now into more serious roles. So does that recognition earn her an Oscar nomination? I guess we'll find out soon enough. But yeah, overall, just looking forward to seeing the film. Adam Pearson for A Different Man. What a great nomination this would make. Not just because of the type of role it is, but for someone who has this condition, getting up onto the Oscar stage and being able to talk to everybody, maybe give some heartfelt message, or maybe not, you just don't know. That's, of course, if he wins. But that is a very long shot because of the type of movie, from what I understand it to be, is very weird. It's practically a horror film at some point, and it might not be the Academy's thing. So yeah, consider this one of those nominations I wish we could see happen, but most likely it's not going to. Drew Starkey for Queer. This one just makes sense, right? I mean, I know all eyes are on Daniel Craig and the performance he's gonna give, but I mean, it would make sense to also take a look at the lover of the film, right? The love interest? Yes? Yeah, a relative new actor from what I understand. Could this be one of those things where he just shows up and blows everybody away? And especially with, again, how slow a year it might be for films, just breaks into the Oscar, just skyrockets his career, get it off on a really high note? I think the potential is there. And especially, how big is he going to be in the film? Is it practically going to be a co-lead? Or is it just a supporting role? Regardless, I do think you have to give consideration to him potentially getting into the Oscars as well. Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice. Just go back to what I said about Maria Bakalova. If the movie does come out, you have to give consideration to the supporting performances. I hear Jeremy's really good in the film, and if the film does come out, he most likely will be in contention. But that's the big what if as of right now. And yeah, it's not looking too good. So I understand if you just completely knock him off your list for now. Though, as a side note, if the film does get pushed to next year, would it still be a big Oscar contender? Or because we are no longer at the voting stages, if you will, of the presidential campaign, does it diminish the film? Does it diminish the film? That's the question. Does it diminish the performances? Is it only a good film during times of election period? And because of who is the subject material of the film and the presidential candidate? All interesting questions, don't you think? Regardless, if the movie comes out, give him consideration. If not, we'll see what happens next year. Denzel Washington for Gladiator 2. Last one I'm talking about for today, because again, it's hot as balls, my clothes are starting to stick to me, I'm uncomfortable. And I'm going to talk about the one exception I'm giving to Gladiator 2. If you haven't seen my previous predictions, you know I'm not looking forward to this movie. I think it's gonna be bad. at the very least, it'll be mediocre. That's my prediction for that film. The one exception is Denzel. I think he would be great as an antagonist, and I think he could potentially get the Oscar nomination, even if the film doesn't end up being all that spectacular. I think he has that star power to him. I think he's a fantastic actor, and I think people gravitate to him even when he's not in the best of films. I always think of Roman J. Esquire. That's a very forgettable film, but he still got in. So, yes, I could potentially see him getting in for this one, even if the movie's not all that amazing. But that's really all I got to say on it. Still not looking forward to the movie. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you today. Now, next month, I will be going over the full Oscar predictions, every single category. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. I'm excited to share with you what my ideas are for the other ones. And while it's fun just taking a deep dive into these specific categories, I do miss just going over the whole thing. So yeah, next month. Until then, everybody, like always, stay safe out there and have a good one.